In an ever-evolving corporate landscape, general counsels are no longer confined to the traditional role of ensuring legal compliance. Instead, they are emerging as strategic partners and influential voices at the forefront of business decision-making. Today, we explore this paradigm shift, examining how GCs are transcending their traditional duties to become key drivers of organizational success. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in extending a warm welcome for our next set of panelists. First, we have Manish Lamba, sir. He serves as the General Counsel at DLF Cyber City Developers Limited. He has also worked with companies like Bharti Airtel and Bharti Realty in the past. He has been on the User Council of the Singapore International Arbitration Center. He has also been a part of the legal committee of ASSOCHAM, PhD Chambers of Commerce, FICCI, and many other legal think tanks. We're fortunate to have you here, sir. Next, we have Dr. Akhil Prasad. Dr. Akhil Prasad serves as the board member, Group General Counsel, Company Secretary at Boeing India. He specializes in the field of contracts and litigations, JVs, IPR infringements, product liability, and corporate law. Further, we have Dr. Sumit Pahwa. Dr. Sumit Pahwa, a corporate lawyer and a company secretary with 25 years of experience, is the founding partner of eMinds Legal and co-founder and CEO of Complinity Technologies, India's leading compliance software, contributing to 1,000+ legal companies. Next, we have Mr. Satyajit Gupta. Mr. Satyajit Gupta is the Vice President, Assistant GC and Head of India Legal and CSR for EXL, a global analytics and digital solutions company. His focus areas are M&A, FDI, market entry considerations, banking and finance, insolvency laws, and many more. Next, we have Ma'am Rashmi Kathpalia. Rashmi Kathpalia, ma'am's career is based on a solid foundation of premier education in India and prestigious higher level professional development programs in UK. She has acquired significant international work exposure, several specialization in addition to cutting-edge legal experiences, which is based on working in courts in India, independently arguing matters and also briefing renowned senior lawyers and international law firms. She has also developed sharp leadership skills and cultural navigability, having been a litigator in Indian courts and being a part of country's senior management team in an American and European company. Lastly, we have Dr. Ashok Sharma, founder and CEO at Federation of Indian Corporate Lawyers. He is an experienced influencer with demonstrated history of working for 49+ years in the legal services industry. He is also an arbitrator, conciliator, and an advocate. He specializes in the field of corporate contracts, litigation management, legal compliance, government relations, and public policy. We welcome you all to the stage, please. Together, all our panelists bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to our conversation, offering unique insights into the evolving role of GCs. We're really fortunate to have you all here.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I am Dr. Sumit Pahwa. The topic of the day is the evolving role of GCs from custodians of compliance to business leaders. I think it's a very apt topic. The General Counsel concept itself for the last 10 years, 15 years has really evolved. This term was not used in India earlier, but now it has become a very important position. I truly feel, and why I get the sort of right to speak on the topic, just a 10-second about myself. I've been the General Counsel of Barclays Shared Services 13 years back, and then started the law firm eMinds Legal, and now I'm the co-founder CEO of Complinity Technologies, which is a legal tech venture compliance software. So myself sort of transformed from a company secretary, compliance officer, to a general counsel, to a partner of a firm, and now an entrepreneur. So I think this topic is very, very close to my heart, to my own journey as such, from a law student to a GC to an entrepreneur myself. And we have a very nice, esteemed panelists today from different walks of life. And I'm sure it will be a very interesting sort of conversation. So just to set the context, I think my two bit on the evolving role of GCs is that the GC, imagine the GC at the center of the circle, where right from the incorporation of a company, the birth of a company, where the GC has to get involved, from the hiring, the employee issues, the terminations. So employee as one sort of stakeholder, which is a key stakeholder. Employees make an organization, and a GC is so well embedded in the entire HR process as such. Then if you see the vendors of a company, be it negotiating contracts with them, be it vendor due diligence, be it vendor compliances, a GC has a very, very critical role to play. Coming to customers, the customer contracts, the strategy to acquire customers, the locations, the entities, the marketing, the sales, a GC is very, very pivotal in the customer journey as well. Coming to the shareholders, the GC is again the management representative towards the shareholders. Now, be it the funding from the angel investors or the VCs or the private equities or the promoters, the general counsel is very, very pivotal in the shareholder management or the shareholder relationship management. The lenders, the hundreds and thousands of pages of loan agreements that are negotiated when the companies are raising funds, that also a GC has a very, very critical role to play. I remember in my old days having a consortium of lenders across a conference table and hundreds and thousands of pages of loan documentation and how a GC is so well critical in that. The board of directors, a GC again provides a key, he's a key advisor to the board of directors of a company as a chief advisor. And of course the compliance. The compliance has been the historical traditional role and it still remains. We cannot discount compliance. Compliance is the only way to do sustainable business, be it compliance with the laws, regulations, not only local laws, but also now global laws. With the onset of multinational companies and Indian MNCs, Indian companies going abroad, we have so many global laws now applicable to a company, from Anti-Bribery Act to FCPA to GDPRs to KYC, AML, etc. And we've all seen, even as compliance, what can happen to large companies if compliance is not taken care of. And it's not just the letter of the law, it's the spirit, it's the policies, it's so many things related to even compliance. So I think I would now, since morning there have been talks about Shakespeare and mythology, etc. So I'll just draw a parallel of the GC role with the Krishna, where he is the Sarthi, and to the management or the CEO called Arjun, where the GC's role is to show him the right path, to show the companies and the management the right path, and steer them in the right direction within the legal boundaries, within the ethical boundaries. And I think it's a very, very pivotal and a key role. So in that context, let me just open the panel discussion, and I'd like to ask Dr. Ashok. He has been the ex-GC of MMTC, which is a PSU. Sir, what's your experience, on the GC's role in a PSU? If you could, share your views about it.
Thank you, Sumit. I was Chief Law Officer of MMTC Limited, earlier which was Minerals and Metals Trading Corporation. In late 80s and early 90s, with the process of liberalization which was started by the government of India, Minerals and Metals Trading Corporation of India Limited, which was a canalizing agency, its role was changed. many of the items which were earlier canalized became free. So suddenly, there was a total change in the work role which I was performing. Uh, Earlier, my role was advisory part of it and basically litigator. But suddenly, with the new parameters which had come, MMTC was competing in an open market with the other private companies, and a lot of new initiatives were taken. At that point of time, management took decision to go for 6 joint venture companies, setting up a gold refining plant, setting up a steel plant in Odisha in collaboration with the state of Odisha and some others. And suddenly from a litigator, my role had become more of a transactional lawyer, going through joint venture agreements, which was a totally new thing for me at that point of time. And for some time I was all at sea, but then slowly and slowly, after going through 1 or 2 transactions, and somehow we got the hang of the whole thing, the new paradigm shift which has taken place in our work thing. Litigation had become secondary, transactional work had become our primary work. Me and my team struggled for initial some period, but then with the help of external lawyers and some learning on the job, I think we were able to do it. So it is the economy which has changed the complexion of GCs, as they are called in private sector, and in public sector we call them chief law officers. Lot of companies now, even public sector companies, they are going on for new initiatives. A gas company is going to set up a power plant. A mineral company is going for wind power energy. So all these are things which are everything new, and what are the compliances, what are the nitty-gritties. So a general counsel has to, really learn the business before he applies law. So that is my 2 cents on it.
Very well said, Dr. Ashok. So Manish, we may have you back here. So Dr. Ashok shared his experience of being a GC in the PSU. I would like to hear, you're currently the GC of DLF, which is the great sort of in the private sector, real estate, as well as you have experience in Bharti and Coca-Cola and other sort of in the private sector as a GC. And also you're the founder of Sadgamya, which has so many other GCs from so many other industries. So what is your take on the evolving role of GCs in India now?
Okay, so I'll just give you a historic perspective when what things were. So I'm 50, so I can take you back 50 years, and 25 of this is my living memory. So what has happened is that originally when this profession started, I've worked for 10 years in a law firm. I started my career with as an understudy with Mr. Harish Salve. Thereafter I joined a law firm, then I joined Coca-Cola. Then I was with the Bharti group for 10 odd years, 12 years, and then I moved to the DLF. So when things started, all companies were Lala companies in India, apart from East India Company. We know that was the first company which came to India. And thereafter what happened? So thereafter what happened, small businesses in India, the Lala was lot onto himself. He was an accountant, he was a marketing, he was a sales, and then he realized कि यार सारा काम मैं कुछ नहीं करूँगा, एक मुंशी रख लेते हैं. तो फिर मुंशी भी बहुत सारी चीज़ें देखता था, कागज़ देख लेता था, दूसरी चीज़ें करता था, तो the मुंशी became a court clerk or a semi-lawyer. Then that munshi over a period of time was replaced with a chartered accountant because आपकी 40 crore से sale बढ़ गई. So you had that statutory requirement that ultimately you required a chartered accountant, or a CFO was something which was required. And in most of the companies you would see that CFO, in many cases, not now, but when I started when I started off the profession, the legal department used to work with the or under the CFO or report to him. So this was the reporting structure. But at the same time, in government organizations and in those factory-driven organizations, you had a very big labor department and the personnel department and the admin department and the HR department. That usually the officer, the admin officer and the HR officer used to also look after the law. So that was one branch which said. Then, insofar as Companies Act and the companies grew, I don't know what was the limit. You, as a company secretary, you will be able to tell. 2 crores initially, you had to there was a requirement of a company secretary statutorily. 203 section. Okay, 203 section. So he's a company secretary as well. So you will find that what happened, that company secretaries, the CFO would say, "Sara kaam mere se nahi hota." So ultimately, it is becoming specialized also, and Companies Act is very tedious. So ultimately, a company secretary, by requirement of law, was put in. And once a company secretary came in, and company secretary used to develop as a legal officer as well. And ultimately what happened, and over a period of time, they realized that insofar as company secretarial work is also a full-time job, litigation, compliance and other contracting are also very large. So ultimately, out of the fact that who's going to interact with law firms and things of that nature, they started recruiting insofar as lawyers also. Banks used to have legal officers, insurance companies used to have legal officers, PSUs used to have a legal officers, companies like Tata had a legal officer, and ultimately Nani Palkiwala was also its chairman, but Nani Palkiwala never joined Tata's full-time, and therefore he could maintain his sanad. So the pinnacle which you could reach in a company was a chairman and also the council. All important cases of Tata Sons were, and their group companies were done by Nani Palkiwala. So there are not many reported cases you will find that of Nani Palkiwala which are other than the Tata Group or in one way or the other. So Nani Palkiwala became a de facto General Counsel. So by 1991, companies like ITC had, when I was there, used to have General Counsels. K. Suresh used to be there, and that position used to be called solicitor. Aditya Birla, Birla Group, and all these Tatas, they had some kind of a General Counsel or the other. But this idea had not swept in. And ultimately, it became a necessary evil with 1991. Liberalization took place, foreign companies came to India, and they had to hire, they understood the distinction between a general counsel or the legal department and the secretarial department and the compliance department. All these became over a period of time. And after 1991, the law also developed, the Companies Act developed, the labor laws developed, the taxation laws developed, the laws got implemented, and it was very, very necessary that this had shaped by that time as a very, very independent kind of a role and responsibility. But when it started off, everybody was not Tata Sons and everybody was not ITC. Over a period of time, they realized that the lawyers are not there for only drafting contracts. They have to participate into the business. They have to understand the requirements of a business. So therefore, there are areas which are grey, the areas which are black and white, and there are areas where you require workarounds. And ultimately, insofar as lawyers in-house became the custodian of the facts. So they had to go to the law firms, present them with the facts, get their petitions drafted, vet them, understand that insofar as the factual elements were there, were all correct. So to that extent, the role increased over a period of time, and then the teams and the sizes became large, and vice versa. In some cases, lawyers reported to company secretary and even the finance department, and then a situation came where even the secretarial departments were reporting to the lawyers, the general counsels and things of that nature, and depending upon the company. And the role became over a period of time complex. And with the foreign companies and multinationals coming and the securities laws becoming, and you were then also liable to have your anti-corruption compliances, ABC compliances. Even your anti-corruption laws of UK and US were also applicable to the Indian subsidiaries. Trainings were required. Over a period of time, POSH came, and ultimately it had to be, Visakha's judgment was not implemented till the law became very strict and the POSH Act came, and ultimately its compliance became. So all these activities became over a period of time very complex. Indian businesses grew, then startups came and other activities came, compliance became, the cost of non-compliance became very heavy. So the culture of managing also goes. And then ultimately it takes a full circle, and so you have to see at the end, you have to see sometimes what happens is that you have to participate in the business. And sometimes you have to also tell the business that in an organization, in a car, you need both an escalator and a brake. And ultimately, the brake function, you cannot have two escalators in the same car. You cannot say you are a lawyer and now you are a business head also. So there is a conflict of interest, and ultimately what may be good for the business or a transaction may not be good for the company or may not be good for the shareholders. And ultimately, today what we have realized is that business enablers and things of that nature, these are very tricky labels sometimes, which are given in corporate companies. When your business head comes and says you are a business enabler, that should be a red flag. Karwana kya chahte ho, karna kya chahte ho. And ultimately we have to steer the wheel and say that, okay, I am there to ensure that you work within the boundaries and within the requirements. It is not necessary that I am a business enabler always. Business is paramount, but my primary function is that of a lawyer, and I must remain within that confines. And we have seen that some lawyers have moved towards business and businessmen have become lawyers. But that is how this role has evolved over a period of time. We have to draw our own lines. We have to say the matter is commercial. I will not speak on it. You do what you like. Or I can say if you do, what happens. But ultimately some confines and some self-restraints are there. Primarily we have a legal role, and we have to look at, divided into 5. It's contracting, compliance, litigation, governance, and then there are other trainings and processes and things of that nature. Depending on the organization where you work, your role either shrinks or expands. In some companies you get the secretarial department, in some companies you get the compliance department, in some companies they feel that the compliance and the legal team should not be the same, and in some people they think that they need to do everything. That's how it is. Depending upon the company where I have worked, my roles have changed, but by and large this is how I have been functioning for the last 25 years. Thank you.
Great. I think Manish has summed up his last 25 years in the last 10 minutes, and beautifully done, Manish. I just pick up from the analogy that he used of a car with an accelerator and a brake. I'll throw it to the audience, non-legal question. Why are brakes there in a car? Anybody? Why are brakes there in the car? Yes? So that we don't overspeed. So that we don't overspeed? Yes? We operate it in a controlled manner. You know, another perspective of why brakes are there in a car is so that we can speed. Because if there are no brakes, we can't speed. So whether the GC is the accelerator or GC is the brake, you decide, but brakes are very important too.
So there is one more thing which is said, is friction a bad thing or a good thing? Huh? Good. So generally in science we were taught that insofar as all scientists keep working, that how do we deal with this irritant called a friction? If there was no friction, cars would not run. So you require, insofar as you take advantage of that, and ultimately, sometimes I feel all those GCs who become business enablers sometimes do more disservice to the organization. They play along with the entire rules, and ultimately they get into trouble. So we have primarily role as a business enabler, but we are not businessmen. And our role is that of a friction. The friction enables the car to move. If there was no friction, there would be only accidents.
Let alone the car, I'd say you can't move if there's no friction. So, you know, the person can't move a step if there is no friction. So, of course, that's important. You want to say something, Akhil, on that?
On friction?
Friction? On friction or your role as a GC?
I would completely agree with what Manish said. We are business enablers. So, I think with my own experience in my 30 years corporate life, I started with joint ventures, working with Modi Group, then mostly with multinationals. And I was the one who always replaced a foreign lawyer in India. So for instance, Electrolux has a European lawyer in India and then American lawyers for American companies. What I used to hear from our business people is, oh, well, wo to European lawyer hai, American lawyer hai, they don't understand how we want to conduct business in India. And it was always heartening for us to hear that, Akhil, you are here and we are able to expedite our business ambitions. So that is what I would definitely think on the friction part. I don't think there should be a friction between law department and the business department. There should be a completely harmony, and that is how I see my relationship with business people has to be in complete harmony. Unless we are in sync, it's like a vocalist and a tabla player. Last night we were at DLF function, we were at the Shankar Ehsan Loy function, and then, you could see the Jugalbandi. So that is exactly what is needed in a corporate room, a Jugalbandi between a general counsel and the business people. Unless you do that Jugalbandi, the music will not be, you will not enjoy the music. So on friction, that is how I see.
Here's Dr. Akhil Prasad, the GC of Boeing, talking about the friction. Of course, there is friction in the air also. So, Akhil, since you started, what has been your experience as a GC of an MNC? What are the, how does it look, from that angle as a GC of Boeing and your experiences in that front?
So, if I take back the discussion which was was happening in the previous session about perhaps the opportunity or a threat of a foreign firm setting up shop in India, I think we as GCs always had that competition. And it was a very healthy competition that, that Manish or Akhil or Dr. Sharma, we always never had that fear that if there were to be a foreign lawyer within Boeing world to come and work here, and I'm going to work with that person, whether there is a threat, there was never a threat. In fact, I know my law better than an American lawyer would ever will. So we had always had that confidence. So being successful as a general counsel is purely a personal thing. We are all individuals. It's not that if I become an advocate or if I become a solicitor or if I become a general counsel, I will be successful as a general counsel. The person has to be successful as a general counsel, for which there are lots of things you need to do. You need to have a complete understanding of your business. That is the priority. If I don't understand aviation, and by the way, when I was being hired by Boeing, I asked that question to my hiring manager, why did you hire me? Because before Boeing, I was working for Fidelity, which was a mutual fund company. And I told him that I don't know anything about aviation. So he said, we want you because you are a general counsel. So perhaps that domain experience is something what that person, my hiring manager, was looking for me, that I have to be a general counsel first. And that is what we should become. So students ask me, they call me and they say that they are in 4th year or 5th year, and they say that we want to become aviation experts. I said it took me 30 years to become not an expert of aviation, but to be able to work in an aviation company. So I think that expertise is a misconception for a general counsel. The moment you say you have become an expert, you don't learn, and if you don't learn, you will not be able to contribute. So in last, I have been in Boeing for last 11 years. It's a 108-year-old company, but in last 11 years, we have grown up like a startup. So when I joined this company, there were about 400 lawyers. Now we are about 8,000. 400 employees. Now we are about 8,000 employees.
I was myself surprised, 400 lawyers.
Right. So 95% of those 8,000 employees are engineers. So we have hired a lot of engineers. So that has been the vertical growth. But success of a general counsel will only happen if I am able to understand Boeing commercial planes. I'm able to understand Boeing's defense business. I'm able to understand Boeing's services business. Only when I'm able to understand the business will I be able to be a successful lawyer. And one thing is very, very foremost, whenever you are discussing or in a meeting with your client, don't emphasize that you are a lawyer in the room. You have to be a problem solver in the room. And that problem could be from any side. It could be a legal problem, it could be a business problem, it could be an enforcement problem. Your business should develop a trust. If I'm coming to your room, a GC room, I will get a solution. Otherwise, there are enough people around who are general counsels, who are not trusted by their business. So that trust will only happen if you become a problem solver.
Very well said, Akhil. So coming to Rashmi ji now, my neighbor on the left. Rashmi ji, you spent 10 years, means a decade in litigation and 2 as a GC, 2 decades as a GC of MNCs. So what has been your journey from a litigator to a general counsel? What are the differences you would like to tell to the audience, and any perspectives on evolving role of the GCs?
So I think all the perspectives have already been shared by my learned friends, Ashok ji, Manish and Akhil. What I would like to contribute here is a few takeaways from these 3.5 decades. Your first point, that what was the difference? So everybody dissuaded me from going from litigation into in-house, and but the opportunity was too exciting. I just thought I needed a change. And so after 10 years of litigation in the High Court and Supreme Court, and having worked with some really important matters in Mr. Sibbal's chambers, and having gone and worked in Ashurst, which was a London law firm, after achieving scholarship. In those days, we did not have, recruiters and things. There was an ad in the paper way back in '98. And I just applied for it, and just like Akhil didn't know much about aviation and engineering, I did not know anything about construction. And I got hired as the General Counsel straight away, because I already had 10 years of experience with Bechtel, which was an American company. Now, I can go on with this entire 3 decades, but I'll cut it short in 2 minutes. Both with the company that I was recently with, and incidentally I retired from there because I reached 60. Technip Energies is also an EPC company, and both these construction companies, I have become more of an engineer than a lawyer. They handheld me into understanding each and every project that happened. That I led, that I negotiated, and after that, when I actually executed, once the project starts getting executed, whether it's an oil and gas refinery or a power company or anything, any power project or any, infrastructure related project. These are very large projects with very large sums of money, a lot of investors. Of course, I was just the contractor's GC in both situations. What I have seen throughout this is not just that you understand, you have to be the solution provider, which Akhil spoke about. You have to learn the industry which you are with. But how this role is evolved is what I really want to talk about. I was a litigator, I understood, so whatever the legal problems were came quite easily to me, but what I needed to understand was how a project is going to get executed, and that's what I learned on the job. In addition to that, the role of the GC has expanded phenomenally. You see, now we are not just talking about law. That is something which we are supposed to be knowing, and laws related to the industry and the company law and the various corporate issues that go with it. The industries have enhanced now. So when we talk about compliance and we're talking about anti-bribery and corruption, we are also talking about the various jurisdictions in which our companies do business. So like Manish said, it is not just Indian ABC we are talking about. We have to do FCPA, UK, France, wherever your company is working, you are affected by that because you're a subsidiary in India. In addition to that, there is ESG, there's environments and governance that you're talking about. You're talking about following the code of conduct. You're talking about what Manish said, POSH. You're doing the trainings. So earlier, when we were doing all this, companies were doing all this, they would just keep sourcing out, and then a point came when they realized that the law firms were way too expensive, and when they are spending so much on their in-house people, they might as well get more expertise in that. And so during my 25 years as a GC, I've also become a very good trainer. I get trained, and then it's training the training, passing it forward, and my entire company depended on me for engaging myself. Once in a while, I would also get external people to come and speak. Similarly, HSE, Health, Safety and Environment, now that is something which never used to be in the legal domain and is still not. I'm not saying it became part of my department, but I was definitely required to go do leadership walks in the, on the projects. I was supposed to see how the health and safety is being followed, whether everything is in order, because unless on a construction site you're taking care of safety, you're not a very good contractor. So these kind of things, when you become a GC, you are a senior management, you're a leader of the company like I was part of the country management. And you're the C-suite, as they call it, part of a member of the C-suite, the leadership management team, and you are then not just a flag bearer of the laws, you are then part of that company, a leader in that company, and everything you say and do has to promote the business. You are the business enabler, and like Manish and Akhil said, you are not, you need to know when to put the brakes. You have to get the company to start listening to you from day one that you joined. So you can't really be, you're not the police, and you're not somebody who is going to put impediments in the business. Your shareholders, your directors are not supposed to see you as somebody who's going to block doing the business, but how to think out of the box and to enable them, to allow them to do things, to give them via medias as to how certain actions can be done without really restricting the entire work processes of the company. So much so that when in a few years ago, when there was a lot of Six Sigma and all happening, the legal departments were required to do it to improve their processes, etc. So the legal department has now become part of the business. It is no longer separate. So just as for example, in an aviation or a construction, the engineers are important, so are the lawyers. HR is important because HR brings in the people. The lawyers bring in the legal aspects, plus whatever they are not able, the company is not able to perform within the structures of the law, they give them an ability to be able to implement that. So the role of the GC has evolved so much in the past 25 years that we are actually nipping the problems at the grassroots level. We do not allow our companies to go to the law firm, to go into litigation. One of my major contributions has been that in both the companies, there was hardly any litigation or arbitration. We were mediating with the PSUs that we were working for, with the private vendors we were working for, so that we could come to a kind of a conciliation where the claims were concerned. So our roles have expanded, not just from the Munshi that Manish was talking about, who was also, in other words, a GC. It has evolved to being the right-handed person of the CEO.
Absolutely. Very well said, Rashmi ji. GC is not a mean role. It's a very challenging role, by the way. Let me share one very personal story. When I was the first time GC many years back, from a compliance officer, I was suddenly given the role of a GC as a vice president of the company in which I was. And we were given dawn raids training. You know, in MNCs, there's a concept of dawn raids, that if the regulator was to land on your door in the early dawn, what will you do or how will you behave? So I got all those theoretical trainings, but of course I had no experience of that. And suddenly what happened is one day a lady was in the elevator, and she was pregnant, she was carrying, and the light went off. And suddenly how elevators behave, you know, irrespective. the elevator quickly came down to the basement and it stopped with a thud. There was a heavy jerk. And suddenly the lady who was pregnant, she had a pain in her stomach. And which was unbearable. And she called her husband, and her husband came, and immediately he called the police. And as per our dawn raids training, if the police was to arrive in the office, only the General Counsel was supposed to speak, nobody else, not even the CEO. And here I was as a General Counsel of that company with the SHO and so many other police people, and I had no criminal background, I had no criminal law experience. I was a poor, innocent, civil or at best a corporate lawyer, and in charge of compliances and advisory and contracts. And suddenly 7-8 police people with gypsies, etc. on the door. And I was given, thrown, okay, go, Sumit, talk. And can you imagine, and we were an MNC as well, Akhil, and I also replaced the foreign lawyer in that job. And immediately there were calls at the back end with the foreign lawyer, with the General Counsel in the UK, with the law firm, what to do, how to behave, pros and cons, risks and opportunities, etc., etc., etc. And these are the challenges I'm saying can happen to any GC. Because as Akhil said, General Counsel cannot be, no one can be an expert in everything. And that's why he's General Counsel. An expert, at best, of course he's a jack of all. At best, he can be an expert of one or max two. He cannot be an expert of everyone. So that was my challenge. My question to Dr. Ashok, is there any such challenge that came your way, in your role as a GC, something that you remember and you would like to share?
Yeah, thank you, Sumit. Well, when I was the Chief Law Officer of MMTC Limited, gold scheme was one of our very popular schemes. We were importing gold and we were giving it to the local associates. They will make jewelry and export. So that gold was imported under a gold bonded scheme. So they will not pay any customs duty. But the problem was that they will get the gold from us and utilize it in the gold market in India, make their profit. They will not export. And what they will export is some raddi and some other things, which parcel when they were opened in Dubai and all, they found it was just nothing but scrap. So one of the problematic parties, we had taken action against that party. He had taken about 10 kgs of gold, and we had taken some criminal action also. What he did was, he filed some criminal action in Ghaziabad court, making our director to 2-3 senior officers as accused, and then those summons never came. And one day, non-bailable warrants issued against the director and 3-4 senior officers. They arrived at our office, and we were all flabbergasted. So somehow we spirited them away, did not let the police arrest them. And then getting those people, on bail without appearance in Ghaziabad court, one of the most challenging things which I really faced. Because that guy, he had a lot of influence in Ghaziabad, and he will say that once they come to Ghaziabad court, I'll thrash them out. So that was the threat he was giving us. So, and of course in every company it happens, there is always a leakage of information. So what I with my counsel, we planned that we'll go to Allahabad High Court and obtain stay. So we booked our air tickets for 1 day later, and we left by train 1 day earlier. No one in the office knew, because I had booked those tickets personally. And office information was that we are going on plane next day. And we landed. We had engaged a senior counsel, Mr. Giri, in Allahabad High Court. He was a very, good criminal lawyer. And next day the matter was fixed, and we obtained stay from the Allahabad High Court. When the matter was being heard, that guy landed up in Ghaziabad court. He found out that we never took that flight. So he could understand, but that by that time he reached, we were able to get the stay. So that was, I think, one of the most challenging things, because director and everybody was under really, pressure. They were threatening me, Ashok, if I'll get arrested, I'll sack you. Of course, it is a threat, but then of course it is not on. I mean, director level guy getting arrested for nothing. That is, I think.
Very nicely said. I think these threats are not uncommon to difficult positions. If I may ask from anyone, the floor is open. From the panel, I'm saying, is there any ethical dilemma that you feel you have faced in your role as a GC? Means where you were, where the management is saying something else, you feel it should be done the other way around, and there's a ethical dilemma. I think Rashmi ji has picked up the mic, so Rashmi ji wants to say something.
Yes, I do. Not so much the management. The management actually depended on me, but one of the project sites that we were doing work on in the interior of India, and there was a mob attack by some of the vendors who were having expectation of getting work from us as the principal contractor, and it wasn't given to them, and the promises had been made by the owners, and so there was a mob attack of the vendors, and police was called and FIRs were lodged against the project manager, whereas there was no action from us as the contractor. And so the ethical dilemma we faced at that time was, if you know the interiors of India and how the police works, and at the FIR and the vendor who was expecting work and was not getting any, was obviously very well politically connected over there. And we obviously, as an MNC, our hands are tied and bound, and we cannot do anything to please the authorities in that area. So it was a very difficult situation to get out of and to convince the authorities, the police authorities, that there was no violation of anything by our project manager, and subsequently the project manager was even kidnapped by the vendor. So it went to such a, and this happens in India, in the remote sites that we work in where infrastructure goes on. And the authorities have to be dealt with in a manner that you know what I'm talking about. And even to my management, I had to say, you know what I'm talking about, in inverted commas. And we, as MNCs, I think over here, or even other companies, Indian companies nowadays, nobody wants to really please the authorities. That is not something as a business enabler I'm allowed to do. And whether I should go out to the law firm, and even those lawyers and law firms do not want to engage in doing such interactions with the authorities. So this is a compliance dilemma, which is every general counsel's nightmare, how to deal with it.
Right.
And we are struggling with it all the time.
Manish and Akhil, any ethical dilemma or any instance where you would have disagreed with your management?
I'll not take my own example, but I'll tell you a joke. Rather, which was told to me. I was doing a due diligence at one point of time in Modipuram. There are many factories there. I'm not saying that which one I was doing. So the joke over there was, once a new recruit was there in the legal department or in some of the department, and he worked very well and he did his job. He was given a deadline. He completed it. And the management at that time, the HR department decided, these were good old days, that they will give him a cycle. So cycle was a big thing in those days. So few days after the HR manager came, कहता है कि cycle कैसी है? कहता है यार cycle तो ठीक है सर, लेकिन उसमें stand नहीं है. So बोला stand नहीं है, कहता है अच्छा stand नहीं है, okay we'll get you one. Stand चला गया और the cycle was replaced. So after 1 week again the HR manager met him and told him कि यार now everything is fine. कहता है सर वो stand तो लग गया लेकिन कैरियर नहीं है. स्टैंड तो लगा दिया उसने, लेकिन करियर गायब हो गया. कहता द कॉर्पोरेट लेसन इज यू कैनॉट हैव बोथ, आइदर यू हैव अ स्टैंड और अ करियर. So sometimes, but the art of cycle, whosoever, how many of you know how to ride a cycle? Yeah. So the art of cycle is you have to maintain the balance, and you can maintain the balance only if you keep moving.
Very nicely said. Akhil, any views about these things?
Yeah, on ethical conduct, I think there has always been a zero tolerance. So nothing unethical can be digested by the company, but I think dilemmas always happen on a day-to-day basis. So my previous example on the Jugal Mandi, so whenever we are in a discussion with our compliance team, there is always an out-of-sync music, you know. Tabla will not gel with vocalist and vocalist will not gel with the sitar, and all that will happen. But then at the end of the day, you have to make your people understand that why the value of compliance is so important. So some companies may think it's an added cost. Why should I invest in that kind of a compliance program? And compliance program, I'm not saying only for the laws. I think compliance program also are for the corporate policies. And then, you know, business gets stifled that, you know, why so much, we are being held so much, we are not being allowed to operate business freely. So I think it is your job as a general counsel to make life easy for your respective businesses. So it should not be directly that do this and do that. I think you have to hold their hand to ensure that that ethical or that conflict within the room gets resolved. And if that happens, you know, that trust is built up, and then you are able to get a place of trust and confidence in your business colleagues. So that is something which perhaps some of us are not very good at doing it, but some of us with experience become good at doing these kind of things.
Very nicely said. So we are almost towards the end of the session. How much time do we have? Or 5 more minutes? Okay. So any audience question? Yes, please. We have a question ready. The mic will be there with you. My question is to all the GCs. Yeah, sir, if you can use the mic, it will be clear.
My question is to all the GCs, but more focused towards Dr. Akhil. I'm an arbitrator from the corporate world. I've got 40 years corporate experience.
Can you just hold the mic closer to your mouth?
My question is to all the GCs, but more focused towards Dr. Akhil from Boeing. I am an arbitrator from the corporate world. I have a corporate background of 40 years. Now, this new genie of whistleblowers, and you spoke about ethics and dilemma. And there's been a recent case of a whistleblower of Boeing in the US who committed suicide, which happened less than 72 hours ago. How would you face such a dilemma in India if you knew that your whistleblower is right, but you as a GC are the face of the company? It's a personal dilemma and it's an ethical question at the same time.
Not sure whether Akhil can comment on the Boeing example.
No, no,
I don't want him to comment on the Boeing thing.
No, I will.
No, I don't want him to comment on. My question was the personal dilemma.
For sure.
Correct. So, you know, that's a very valid question, and I am not shying away from answering it. So I think what is essential in your organization is to have a framework of compliance, framework of ethical business conduct. You should have a policy of, in Boeing we call it as a seek, speak and listen policy. That whatever anybody in the company is allowed to stand up and say whatever they want to, it will be heard. So to your particular example, the problem will be that if we do not have a system, the system will not prevent from people not speaking up openly. But whether you have a system in place. For example, our compliance program, whenever we do that compliance check with any of our suppliers, with any of our employees, what we need to see is whether the framework is operational or not. Whether your framework gives you a real MRI about the company. It is not that I have a compliance program, everything should be green. I will be very happy to see if the compliance program generates a lot of red and amber, because that is where the problem areas are. That is where you need to fix as the management. But the problem is when you overlook those systems. So unfortunately what happened, I do not have details of it because it's not an issue which I have been involved in directly. But if it has led to a suicide, it is very, very unfortunate. And it will be investigated and the reports will be out. Same thing, for example, for our, the door plug which went out from Alaskan. 5 years ago, 2 planes went down. I'm not shying away, but I think it's an eye-opener. There is always scope of improvement. There is always scope of introspection. That is what should happen in your organization. Whether in your organization you have devoted resources to build up a process which throws up red flags. That is what is important.
Great. Any last question? Yes. If you could, say very briefly, and the answer also, I'll request the panelists to be very brief.
Thanks, the learned speakers, for all the insights. Just to add on what Akhil you mentioned, in terms of the coordination between the compliance and the GCs, in terms of how do you envisage the role of GCs, principally in an Indian setup, which is a promoter-driven setup, that how does the GC or the team ensure in terms of the transactions which are happening with, say, the connected or the non-related entities? Because from a compliance perspective and from a GC perspective, such transactions are the red ones, which is how the things, because all the regulators and everything these days. So that was principally I wanted to ask.
So let us partner in this. So let me first talk about myself, about coordination. So 5 or 6 years ago, we did not have a compliance program at all in our company. So we all got together, what should we do? So what we did is we formed a compliance process, but the resources were within the organization. So we did not have money, or Boeing has money, but we did not have enough, functional support to come up with a budget. So instead, we had a nomination of each and every functionary within the organization to come and join that compliance program. And the idea was very, very simple. We have to crush bureaucracy within the organization. We have to make systems very, very efficient. Whether it is one company, whether it's our enough companies within the Boeing enterprise organization, or whether in Fidelity, or whether in Disney, where I worked for, the role was very, very simple, that the shared services organization will make lives better for all subsidiaries of the enterprise that are operating within India. You can talk about Indian companies.
I agree with my brother.
Perfect. So I think we're almost at the end of the session. I think my closing question, if every speaker could just say 15 seconds about what are the top 2 or 3 qualities that you feel are there or should be there in a general counsel, and we'll close there. So we'll take turns right from Akhil. So let's start from, let's start from Ashok ji.
Well, a good general counsel needs to know the business of the company. He needs to know his law. And then he has to apply law to the business situation in a practical manner.
Perfect. Thank you, Rashmi ji.
So, not just the governance of the company and knowledge of the laws, but also knowledge of your industry. So far, the corporate secretarial governance and code of conduct and compliances have been GC's domain. GC's domain has been the laws in any case, when you need to go out and get legal assistance from law firms, etc., or you have knowledge about yourself. The 2 things that are required now in today's environment is knowledge of your industry and also the knowledge that you are gaining to impart it. So I cannot emphasize enough that trainings to the rest of the company by the GC, by the legal department is essential.
Thank you. Manish?
I'll keep it short, only 3 C's: competence, common sense, and commitment. Nothing else is required.
Great. 3 C's of the GCs. Yes.
So I think from my perspective, I think there are 2 things. One is always be available for your client. So in my so far career of 30 years, perhaps I've never been on a vacation, because if I were on a vacation, I've never been on a vacation, because my laptop or my computer has always been with me. And, because unlike other companies, we only have 3 people in Boeing India, in the law department. So that is one, always be available. And the second thing which is important for me is always have an open door policy. The door should never be shut. Whenever you are in office, my door is always open, so anybody can come in, come out, which may not be an efficient way of how things are done, but this is how I've been operating so far.
I think the key takeaway from Akhil's point is the vacation for a GC is not a vacation, it's a change of location. So, okay, my 2-bit on the GC role is GC as a business leader, and that's what was the theme also. The GC has to understand the business, be it the construction or be it the aviation or be it the real estate or be it gold. You have to know how does the company make money, who are the customers, who are the vendors, who are the shareholders, who are the lenders. It is extremely important to get into the business, first of all. And also when, a GC can negotiate the tightest of the agreement or can draft the most sort of the tight and the one-sided agreement, provided it just gets executed or agreed on the opposite side. So I think a best agreement, if that's also a very important role for a GC, is the one which is fair, which is impartial, which takes care of both the sides, which is win-win, which is not win-lose, lose-win. And I think that empathy is important. Otherwise, GCs are perceived or may be perceived as brakes, who are impediments in the business, who only show red lights, who only show red flags, rather than, the ones who give those green signals that how, do not tell your managements why this cannot be done, tell them how this can be done. Of course, within the four corners of law, within the four corners of ethics, within the four corners of compliance. So that's what I think a General Counsel is all about. So with that, I thank my panel, Dr. Ashok, Rashmi ji, Manish, Dr. Akhil, and thanks to myself for moderating the session. So thank you audience for a wonderful audience. Thank you.
I want to express my sincere appreciation to the panel, and I think they have set the bar higher for the next panel as well. Quickly, we'll go on to the mementos. I request Dhani sir to present the mementos to all our guests. We'll be beginning with Dr. Ashok Sharma. Then we have Rashmi ma'am. I request you to give them a big round of applause. Next we have Manish Lamba sir. Next we have Akhil Prasad sir. And we have Dr. Sumit Pahwa. I request you all for a group photo. I would like to thank all our panelists once again.